On 8th of May, the government put in place another additional buyer's stamp duty, this time on living trusts. My name is Grace and welcome to another episode of Real Estate News. Today we talk about the new ABSD on living trusts and how it will affect high net worth property investments. Typically, trusts are used for estate planning. The assets of the truster or settler are legally put into the hands of the trustee, who has the fiduciary duty to manage the assets in the best interest of the beneficiaries of the trust. The legal intricacies of trusts and their loopholes can be complex to the everyday person. Previously, living trusts did not have an identifiable beneficiary, which allowed purchasers of residential property to avoid the hefty ABSD tax. The new ABSD rule closes this loophole by making sure that residential property purchases made through trusts are properly accounted for on their tax front. So how is this loophole played out in reality on the ground? Usually, this happens when a buyer has maxed out on their names on properties, for example, one property under each spouse's name. The family does not want to be taxed under ABSD to purchase additional properties, and their children are below the age of 21, thus barring them from using their children's name to own real estate. However, using trusts as an instrument to own multiple properties requires the fulfillment of a few criteria. The property has to firstly be fully paid. The property has to be held under trust, with beneficiary owners usually under the age of 21. And the property has to be held for a period of years before the trustee can dispose of the property on behalf of the beneficiary owner. When the beneficiary owner turns 21 years of age, the property will then belong to this beneficiary owner fully. This method is usually used for private properties and thus affects the children's ability to own any form of subsidized property like a BTO or even resale HDBs when they turn 21. Even if the children were to dispose of the trust property when they are of age, they would have to wait out 30 months before they're eligible for any form of subsidized property. The new ABSD rules on living trusts raises the concern of balance between transparency and privacy. To what extent should individuals, particularly the high net worth, be able to conceal what they own and how they structure their assets? While these might be out of sight for the public, it isn't for the government and tax authorities. The intricacies and complexities of trusts can allow individuals to mask the ownership of assets by layering trusts over trusts. In this way, the beneficiary owner of a trust is also another trust. This way of masking the ownership structure of assets can be challenging to tax authorities. Should residential property ownership be made transparent? One interpretation of the recent ABSD slapped onto trust is that the answer is yes. By putting a hefty 35% ABSD on living trusts for purchasing residential property when no identifiable individual is stated as the beneficiary third party, strongly discourages trusters from trying to complicate the ownership structure of trusts. Trust as a form of estate planning is more private than a will. Since trust documents are separate and not included in the probate, some members of your family need not be privy on how you want your assets distributed or managed for your intended beneficiaries. It is also a very proactive way of estate planning for wealthy individuals. Where the government is perhaps drawing the line is when complex trusts are created with the intention to hide asset ownership. A fine balance is drawn between maintaining privacy through the establishment of trusts, not being transparent with authorities on how assets are owned by high net worth individuals. Another issue that is raised in the recent ABSD implementation is capital redistribution. Some consider this as leveling of the playing field. In some cases, it really is. The additional tax revenue that could be earned from the ABSD on large private property transactions is not a small sum. While smaller in volume, the large quantum makes such taxes a sizable amount. If you consider such taxes as a way to redistribute wealth in society, then we can consider it a form of capital redistribution to other people in society who are the beneficiaries of government grants. This could also be considered as a way to redistribute opportunities in the market. If the ultra-wealthy in society are able to avoid ABSD on residential property, they would be able to build out a portfolio of investment-grade residential property. This pumps up the demand for mid to high-end private property, which might price out people who are upgrading for their own stay property. By closing the loophole using ABSD trusts, opportunities are redistributed such that individuals who own multiple properties are not able to avoid ABSD by purchasing through trusts. However, the new ABSD trust is not so far-reaching that it can be considered a cooling measure. The commentary on the new ABSD so far is that its implications are limited to a specific demographic in society, targeting high net worth or ultra high net worth individuals that set up trusts to manage their assets for intended purposes. This ABSD rule change might not look like much, but it may have spillover effects on how high net worth individuals strategize on their property investments. Generally, higher ABSD would discourage wealthier investors from buying multiple properties under their own name. This might leave them with two possibilities if they do not want to deal with this 35% ABSD tax. First, they could invest in higher quantum properties within the one property limit to avoid ABSD. Second, they could invest in multiple properties using the name of different family members with variability on how much leverage they can take to buy the different properties, provided that the family members are all above the age of 21. They will also technically not be able to own or control those properties since it is under another person's name. The trade-off here is that this beneficiary would have to pay ABSD if they wish to buy another property on top of what they were given. From a theoretical perspective, it makes sense to invest in higher quantum luxury projects at their current growth rates. This subsegment has been outperforming other property subgroups and may continue to do so for the rest of 2022. Another plausible strategy would be to substitute trust with a holding company for commercial real estate. While commercial real estate cannot be used for residential property, it can still be used to gain exposure to the real estate market while avoiding ABSD in the wealth inheritance plan. This holding company can issue shares to its beneficiaries to enjoy the benefits of ownership. The structure of ownership here is also a lot more flexible than residential real estate. If this is the case, then commercial shophouses are a good entry option for those intents and purposes. They have exhibited the highest growth potential out of the investable options in the commercial real estate on average. The government's response to the trust loophole for residential property purchases might have been motivated by the K-shaped recovery and unequal growth rates between property segments. The luxury segment for property has been doing exceptionally well, which might have motivated the ABSD response targeting individuals buying properties using trusts. If you're one of those individuals being impacted by the change in policy and would like to know more about alternative investment strategies to gain exposure in the real estate market, reach out to our experts at PropertyLimBrothers to have a private consultation. My name is Grayce. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Real Estate News, and I'll see you in the next episode.